Hello. So I have always loved zebras. I just think they're beautiful. They make me smile. And what I love about them is that just like with our fingerprints, each one has a unique pattern of stripes, yet their survival and their dependence completely relies on them living together as one in a herd. My story begins in 2009 when I watched the film Hotel Rwanda. Has anyone here seen that film? Yeah, right. So, admittedly, I was fairly emotionally challenged, having just given birth to our fourth child. But it did motivate me to jump on my white horse and gallop away to Kenya to help save poverty. And while I was in Kenya, I visited a number of the internally displaced persons camps, or IDP camps as they're sort of commonly known. They're very analogous to the Rwandan genocide situation. And I remember walking through one particular camp, which was horrendous. There were 15,000 people living in makeshift tents on 12 acres of land. There was no running water, there was no semblance of order, and there was no facilities for sewerage. And I just remember one point in that day feeling particularly overwhelmed with the fear and the noise and the chaos. And I saw this woman watching me with a baby the same age as my little Rocco that I just left at home. And she smiled at me, and she invited me into her tent. And she gave me her little baby to hold, and it was just what I needed. I got that cuddle. And we sat like that in stillness in her tent for about half an hour because she didn't have any English, and embarrassingly, my Kiswahili is atrocious. But she just gave me that stillness to continue on amongst the chaos. And when I left her tent, someone said to me, "Do you know that woman's story?" And I didn't. They told me that during that 2007 election violence, her husband and her children were murdered, and she was raped. And the child that I had been holding was a result of that rape. When I was with this woman in her tent, she told me her baby's name was Miracle. And it never ceases to amaze me that she turned what I would have seen as a complete tragedy into a miracle. And she inspires me to try and do the same every day. So returning from that trip to Kenya, I came home and I convinced my good friend Kerry Chittenden to come on board our social enterprise So They Can. And So They Can empowers materially poor people through education. And since beginning 6 years ago, working with those communities and their governments, we have created the Aberdare Rangers Primary School, which is a public school. Currently, we've got 700 gorgeous children there, and there's going to be 1,080 in 3 years' time in a full primary school. Thank you. We've also put down the Teachers Training College, a nationally registered teachers training college in Tanzania. And we've empowered 300 women each year through a business education and startup loans through our microfinance business school. We've taken 120 orphaned and vulnerable children out of the rubbish dump and surrounding slum areas and brought them into our Holding Hands Children's Home, where we give them a care and protection and food, and we educate them at our Aberdare school. We've also established a clinic in collaboration with the Kenyan Ministry of Health, and that supports the medical needs for our 20,000 in this community. And we're also very conscious on empowering and growing the local economy. So we've got various social businesses. One of them is So Women Can, where we take young girls off the streets from prostitution. We bring them into our workshops and we train them up to be tailors. And then they make all our school uniforms. And as much as I would love to speak to you all about the projects we have on the ground, and as passionate as I am about them, I'm actually not here to talk about that today. What I want to talk to you about is all that I have received from these people and the joy I've got from dancing as one with those beautiful zebras. The dictionary defines charity as an organisation set up to provide help and raise money for those in need. There is no mention of all we receive in return for giving. So in other words, it's a strictly one-way street. And I think this is a terrible mistake because we feel good when we give. We can't give without receiving. And until people acknowledge that and realise how much they get from their giving, then we're never going to win this fight against poverty. I met this beautiful boy, Daniel, in the Nakuru rubbish dump a number of years ago. And the rubbish dump is a horrendous place. Unlike the rest of Africa, have many of you been to countries in Africa? You'll probably know that whenever you're anywhere in the streets of Africa, these children run towards you and they're laughing and they're full of light and joy. But this rubbish dump isn't like that. It's a dark place and there are very few smiles. Hundreds of people live off this rubbish dump, and many of them are children orphaned from HIV/AIDS or the 2007 election violence. These children compete with these massive pigs and these vulture birds that are literally as tall as them for food. I met Daniel and I went to introduce myself, and I put my hand out to shake his hand. And he extended his hand, and glancing at it, he noticed it was covered in dirt, and he pulled it away and he said these words, "Naiona Haya." And I didn't know what those words meant at that time. I asked if I could take this photo and he nodded, but again he said these words, "Naiona Haya." And later that evening I asked someone what those words meant, and they told me it means "I'm so ashamed." It just broke my heart. The injustice is twofold. First, that Daniel is allowed to live in a rubbish dump competing with pigs and vultures for food, while I live with all the warmth and security and love that I am showered with every day. But secondly, Charitable's failure to recognise all that we receive in return from giving has people like me up on that metaphorical white horse riding in to save Daniel out of pity. It makes him feel unworthy to shake my hand as an equal. This charitable, one-way giving focus, it hurts us too. When So They Can began, I was up on that white horse, and no doubt my ego was pretty much heavily involved. And I aimed to give all I could in both time and money. And I focused completely on the giving and failed to notice and to value all that I was receiving. It was depressing and exhausting, and after about 5 years, I disconnected from pretty much all of my relationships. I did nothing but work. I took myself way too seriously, and I literally forgot how to laugh. And so luckily for me, my gorgeous husband Phil and my beautiful sister-in-law Maureen, they said to me, "Why don't you take some time for yourself, Cass, have a few days away?" And I graciously accepted that, and I took that time to reflect on all the people I had met through my work and how my work connects me to my core values of justice, passion, purpose, joy, and courage, and how I am enriched for that. Slowly, I started to climb down from this white horse. I realized that rather than me carrying that burden of always having to deliver, we both needed each other. And this changed my mindset of giving from a depleting, one-way giving to reciprocal nourishment, and enabled me to continue on in a much more balanced and sustained way. I heard this story once about an anthropologist that went to a remote village in Africa, and he collected up all the children from the village, and he said, "That tree over there, I put a big basket of mangoes, and the first child to get there gets to eat all those mangoes for themselves." And the children looked at him and they grabbed each other's hands and they ran towards that tree together, laughing. And they arrived at the tree together and they sat down and they ate all that fruit together as one. When the anthropologist said to them, "Why didn't one of you try and get that basket? Get there first and get that basket all for yourselves." Their response was, "Ubuntu. How can one of us be happy if all the others are sad?" It's so simple. Ubuntu is a beautiful African philosophy that means I am because of you. Nelson Mandela would speak of Ubuntu as the essence of being human. And Archbishop Desmond Tutu would refer to Ubuntu when he spoke of how our personal well-being is so deeply connected to the well-being of others. And I think this is why I love zebras. They embody Ubuntu because their survival and their welfare literally depends on them looking out for each other as one. They stand in these herds and they stand face to face, neck over neck, checking for predators. Jane, one of our beautiful students at Aberdeen, taught me about Ubuntu. We have these questionnaires when we check in on our kids every now and then. And in answer to the question, what makes you smile, Jane's answer was, when my friend is happy. And I love this. I've put it up in my office at home as a reminder that happiness is not dependent on how much we accumulate for ourselves. It's completely dependent on how we contribute to the happiness of others. Ubuntu is all about connection, and as Brené Brown said in her inspiring Vulnerability TED Talk, connection is why we are here. It's what gives purpose and meaning to our lives. So they can connect people here to our communities over in Africa. On the trips, we take people over there at the invitation of our communities. And everybody that I have taken to Africa always says the same thing, that they get so much more out of giving to those communities. They get so much more from those communities than they could ever give to them. And this is what inspires them to continue giving. And this is a really important point. These people recognize that they're investing in their own personal well-being when they connect with this other world. For those that can't travel to Africa, we run these great events around the world, and it's literally a big party. It's a celebration of Ubuntu. And of course, our little children at the school, they write to their child sponsors, and those two worlds are then connected in that sort of Ubuntu philosophy as well. By my connection with Daniel and all the other people I've met in Africa, I have experienced this concept of oneness, of Ubuntu. And it's taught me to be grateful for what I've got and to stop complaining about what I haven't got. It's taught me to embrace death in order to live well. It's taught me to live right now and stop lamenting that past or riding roughshod over the present as I clamber towards that future. It's given me the courage and determination to choose happiness, and it's literally just helped me to laugh. I'm lucky enough to have 4 beautiful children. And last year, we took our eldest child, Mia, to Africa for the first time. And Mia is an incredibly strong and brave, but fairly sensitive wee person. I made the hard decision as a mother to take her into that rubbish dump. And she was great for about the first 10 minutes. And then something must have struck her because she started crying with that sort of raw and uncontrollable grief. And as I supported Mia out of the rubbish dump, I noticed that the community from the rubbish dump were literally coming out of those mounds of rubbish, offering Mia their very precious cups of water. Mia's grief was etched on their faces, and they realized that they needed to make Mia happy in order to not be sad themselves. And it struck me that I was choosing to take Mia out of that rubbish dump. I had that choice, and they didn't. But there was no judgment. They just literally encircled us with their compassion. And it just completely demonstrated to me Mother Teresa's beautiful Ubuntu wisdom, that the problem with the world is we draw our circle of family too small. And I love this because it's so true. We do all draw our circles of family too small. And if we didn't, there would be no poverty. I've had many lessons from my classroom of Africa. They have taught me to be grateful for what I've got and to stop pursuing happiness through that accumulation of wealth and to instead just focus on being happy. There seems to be some confusion that wealth is about money. But my 6 years of working in Africa have taught me, in fact, there are 2 types of wealth. Material wealth is about money, but emotional wealth is about living, and we need both of those in order to be happy, in order to be whole. This is Edwin, and he gave me a very good lesson in the difference between material and emotional wealth. I was in the children's home. Edwin's one of our first children that we found and took into the children's home, and he's an amazing kid. And I was doing the dishes with him one night, and he asked me how I do the dishes at home. And stupidly, without thinking, I went into this long, convoluted story about dishwashers. And I said, we've got this big box, and we put all our breakfast dishes in the dishwasher, and then we put all our lunch dishes in, and then we put all our dinner dishes in, and then we let an hour and a half's worth of water, luckily omitting that it was hot, through this machine, and then at the end of all that, we unstack all those dishes, and we start all over again. And I could see his confusion growing on his face. And Edwin looked at me, and he said, so Cass, you've got a really big family at home like us here with 120 kids. To which I said, no, Edwin, we've just got 6 of us. And so with that wisdom of a child, he said to me, so Cass, if you just had 1 plate each, you could wash all those dishes in a minute, saving yourself all that time you spend loading and unloading and waiting. And then you could just come outside and play. See, the people I meet in Africa, they are happier because they value time over things. We need to reject this inaccurate view of charity as being one-way giving. And so I have a dream to revolutionize charity, to acknowledge the reciprocal nature of giving. In doing so, charities need to discard that traditional charitable role of professional beggars and become Ubuntu facilitators, connecting the materially wealthy with those rich and positive emotions, making fundraising an art and connection. Businesses will adopt an investment in philanthropy because of the well-being it provides for their customers and their staff. And likewise, governments will invest in giving because of the well-being of their citizens, focusing not on GDP, but on gross national happiness, as we see in that beautiful country, Bhutan. Only then will giving become sustainable and this fight against poverty finally be won. I never saw Daniel again, and I've always struggled with this. But if I did, or if he was sitting here listening with you now, I would thank him. I'd thank him for showing me the reciprocal nature of giving and for inspiring me to imagine a world where people give not out of ego, nor pity, nor guilt, but because we realize we need to in order to be happy ourselves. One nourished world free of all poverty. I have so loved coming down from that paternalistic and very lonely white horse and dancing as one with those beautiful zebras. It's made me a beneficiary, and I'm so much happier for that. And you are now all invited to the dance. Thank you.